So there is bound to be a certain level of fussing, I would say. But I find a lot of methods take the power away from parents. Like, for example, you think of timed interval method, and it's like these parents are like anxiously looking at a timer, waiting for the timer to go off, telling them when they can go to their own baby. And it's just like, you know your baby best. And yes, we want to give your little one a chance to soothe themselves. But if at any point you feel like, hey, you know what, this crying is escalating, or this is an abnormal cry, or this has just gone on longer than I'm comfortable with, whether that's 10 minutes or whatever that is,
Mm-hmm.
I always work with parents to just stand in their own power and say, yeah, I need to go see my baby, or I choose to go see my baby, not waiting for a timer to go off.
Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Birth Story podcast. If you are joining for the first time today, I'm your host, Alexa C. Girl mom, angel mama to one of the sweetest boys in heaven, birth trauma and uterine rupture survivor, and former NICU mama. Here you will have the opportunity to ask and have your burning questions answered by professionals, feel connected to other women's experiences as we normalize the different aspects of this journey we are on as moms. The real and raw moments of healing are shared here as we navigate loss, embrace strength, and find hope again while learning to live after loss. Please note the topics discussed on this podcast are for educational purposes only. Please see your personalized medical professional if you have any questions or concerns that arise from listening, including diagnosis and treatment. Before I have the honor of welcoming our next guest on the pod, the Ollie Swaddle is sleep coach Sarah approved. The Ollie Swaddle was founded by a foster mama who needed a swaddle for her foster babe that could contain him properly, provide the right pressure, and maintain appropriate temperatures. Once using his Ollie Swaddle, he started sleeping through the night, eating and gaining weight, catching up on developmental milestones, and even got to work on attachment and bonding. The impact had her wanting to share with little ones and their families all over the world, a company and products that put infants' needs first. Visit theollieworld.com/Alexa Conlon or use code Alexa Conlon for your Birth Story podcast discount. And visit the site for more information on Oliver's adoption story. Okay. Well, I'm going to dive right in. So first and foremost, welcome to Beyond the Birth Story podcast. I'm so excited we finally got to make this work. It's been such a long time coming, but I'm just going to start and give you the floor to kind of introduce yourself and give us a little background of who Sarah is and what Passionate About Sleep is all about.
Sure. So thanks so much for having me. Yeah, we definitely had to reschedule a couple times, but such is life and divine timing, right? So it happens when it's supposed to happen. Yeah, my name's Sarah Pashniak. I am a pediatric sleep coach. I've been doing this now for 5 years, and I've worked with 550 babies so far. I was a kindergarten teacher for 10 years. We have 3 children of our own. We have twin boys who are now 9 and a daughter who just turned 6. But many years ago, our babies did not sleep. And I struggled with that a lot. And I think that a lot of parents can relate to that. But some people can do okay with less sleep, and some people cannot. And I'm one of the people who cannot. So, yeah, I found that my mental health was just really spiraling. And once we got our baby sleeping, I was sleeping, and all of the challenges of motherhood and life became a lot more tolerable and enjoyable. So that's why I'm passionate about sleep. And yeah, I love what I do. So that's just a little bit about me.
It's so crazy that you say the boys are 9 because when I met you for the first time, you had just had them, I think. Yeah, I don't think you were pregnant with them. I think you had just had them. And it was at Nade Medi Spa. I think I was giving you a pedicure.
Yes.
Once upon a time. And yeah, so 9 years ago, that is so crazy to put into perspective how long it's really been.
It is crazy. And I remember you taught kindergarten, these parents would talk about how quick it goes. And I kind of eye roll, like, okay, cliche, but it does go fast. It's like, I can't believe I have 9-year-old boys.
Right. And then how old is your daughter?
She just turned 6, but in my mind,
Oh,
she's like 4
goodness.
forever.
She's so precious.
Older than 4 in my mind.
So I'm gonna go right into the sleep aspect of things. That's kind of where like majority of the questions had come from. So the first one is kind of like two in one. When would you recommend that someone kind of contemplate starting sleep training? And two, how old do they have to be to do that?
Okay. So babies need to be 16 weeks adjusted age to begin. So the closer to that 16-week mark, the better. But I think the best time to start is when parents are ready and if they're ready. So yes, there's safe sleep guidelines. And of course, that's very, very important. But I always tell people to do what works for them. And so if you're finding that what works for you like is working, then don't change it. And so even if your baby is 6 months old, say, if you don't feel ready to make changes, don't. Does
Mm-hmm.
that make sense? Yeah. So, but if you are wanting to make changes, the closer you are to that kind of 4 month mark, the better. Anything beyond a year, year and a half just gets a little bit more challenging. Babies are standing up, they are a lot more stubborn, and they have a little mind of their own. And so I really try to do things as gently as possible. So the older a little one gets, just the more challenging it can be because they have a little mind of their own and it's not quite as smooth.
Mm-hmm. Is there like different approaches that you can take for starting the sleep training? Because I know a lot of people that I've talked to, moms specifically, it's like they're so scared of kind of that cry it out method and things like that. And it's like heartbreaking for a lot of moms. So,
Yeah.
how do you approach like that aspect of it?
Yeah. And I think there's some misconceptions around sleep training. Like I think people like you mentioned like cry it out. And I think to
Mm-hmm.
myself and I'm like, cry what out? Like it's not like babies are born full of like a belly full of air that needs to be cried out before they sleep. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
Um, infants do just cry, and overtired babies will cry more. So there is bound to be a certain level of fussing, I would say. But I find a lot of methods take the power away from parents. Like, for example, you think of timed interval method, and it's like these parents are like anxiously looking at a timer, waiting for the timer to go off, telling them when they can go to their own baby. And it's just like, you know your baby best. And yes, we want to give your little one a chance to soothe themselves, but if at any point you feel like, hey, you know what, this crying is escalating, or this is an abnormal cry, or this has just gone on longer than I'm comfortable with, whether that's 10 minutes or whatever that is,
Mm-hmm.
I always work with parents to just stand in their own power and say, yeah, I need to go see my baby, or I choose to go see my baby, not waiting for a timer to go off. So
Mm-hmm.
there are different approaches, but the approach that I use is really just tuning into your parental instincts and tuning into what your baby is trying to communicate, if that makes sense. That can be a little bit cloudy when these babies are super overtired and they're just really irritable and fussy. So as babies catch on to the sleeping process, they're not as grouchy, they're not as overtired, and they're able to communicate with their caregivers easier in a sense because they're, if their crying is escalating, then their parent knows, okay, this is what this means. So it kind of
Yes.
all comes together, typically quite beautifully. But just to kind of summarize the answer, it's yes, there's lots of different approaches, but first and foremost, you are the parent, you know your baby best, and you know your own comfort levels best. So
Mm-hmm.
it's working within that.
I think that's super powerful to say. When I think of it, sometimes with that cried out method or the timer, like you said, and I've talked to a few other moms, it's like, it's almost sounds like you have to abide by those. And it's like, if you're going to sign up to do this, and it's important that you stick to that. Whereas you do know your baby best.
Mhm.
And so to have someone in a position such as yourself who is kind of helping parents come up with these schedules and the routines and teach them about the sleep routines and whatnot, to have you say that as well, I think that's a very powerful thing for these parents to hear.
Yeah, like when we, first time parent, whether you're a first time parent or a 10th time parent,
Yeah.
it feels different each time. But I think of especially, first time parents, you just feel like a fish out of water. And so you're just like kind of looking for guidance, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's really important for us to really just like tune into what we think and what we know to be true, because it's easy to let go of that and to give that away so easily and without even realizing it, just in the name of looking for advice and opinions. But,
Mm-hmm.
just reminding us that, yeah, we do have a parental intuition. And when we go against that, it makes us feel really anxious. If someone's like, oh, we got to wait for that 15-minute timer to go off, parents are chomping at the bit. They're like, this feels like 15 hours. But if you
Mm-hmm.
say to them, go in whenever you feel like you need to, it immediately takes that pressure away and the anxiety away. And our babies really feed off of our energy. So if we are feeling tense and anxious about the process, then our babies are too. But if we're
Mm-hmm.
feeling empowered in the plan and in our own intuition, then our babies feed off of that as well. And it just goes a lot smoother.
Is there like a certain way you go about it with, say, a baby's not having naps during the day, as we're struggling with that right now? It's like the cat naps.
Mhm.
Um, but then also not really sleeping at night. Is there an approach that you target one before the other, or does it kind of go like simultaneously together?
Yeah, I see it so much as a sleep puzzle. So
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, parents, when they reach out to me, if they've tried on their own, they feel like they're unsuccessful, because if you think of several pieces of the puzzle, if you're really only focusing on one piece of that puzzle, then it's not all coming together. And when I work with parents, it's a lot of pieces all at once. So I work with naps and night sleep together because they impact one another directly. So babies who aren't napping well likely aren't sleeping well at night, and vice versa. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it kind of is a system that is all at once. That's what I do anyways. So there might be different
Yeah.
approaches, but that's the way I see it.
It makes like it doesn't make sense in my brain how if they're not napping during the day, why are they not sleeping at night? Like,
I know.
I'm just like I get so exhausted if I don't have like a little cat nap or
I
something and then I
know.
sleep all night. I'm like that's what makes sense to me.
I know. It's that rest and digest versus fight or flight. And
Mhm.
babies, their nervous systems are very immature. And so, if they're dysregulated in one area, and that's with all of us, but babies are just so much smaller, and a 10 or 15-minute wake window difference is huge to them, whereas to us 10 or
Mhm.
15 minutes is nothing, but to them that's like a sixth of their wake window. So um, if naps aren't going well during the day, their nervous systems are kind of more in that fight or flight, which makes their systems just a little bit more dysregulated, so that they're not as easy to soothe and stay sleeping. And then
Mhm.
that just trickles into the next day. And then it kind of just spirals and becomes its own little vortex.
Truly it does.
Yeah. But the reverse is true. When you start changing that direction, it becomes like a reverse vortex, and they just start sleeping better in all aspects, and because they're a lot more regulated.
Mhm. I can only imagine the relief on those parents of just like, ah, we're going to sleep, like
Exactly.
I can hear the breath.
Yes. And that dark cloud just starts to dissipate like the
Mhm.
shoulders, because it's daunting. And when your baby's not sleeping well, you feel like there's something that you're doing wrong.
Mhm.
It's the baby's fault. I'm joking.
Yeah.
Doing it wrong.
Yeah, it's your nervous system.
It's not us, it's them. But
You gotta laugh about it. You
you
gotta.
gotta laugh. Exactly. If only they would just, but they're just like, they're doing it. Like they don't even realize, just sleep. You know what I mean? You're like, just go to sleep. Uh,
Yeah.
but they're like, I don't know how. Or they're just so, like you think of, like I think of my husband, and he plays in the evenings. And sometimes their games aren't until like 9:30 at night. So they play like
Mhm.
9:30 till 11:30. but then he's got all this adrenaline going through his system. He can't fall asleep till like 1 in the morning, but then he's up at like even earlier than usual because he's just not settled.
Mm-hmm.
And then tired during the day, but then you're functioning off of stress hormones, then, right? And so then it's kind of like this false sense of energy. Um, and then you might stay up later again the next night, and then it just
Mm-hmm.
continues. And that's the way babies are too. So they really do fight. They fight the process, but
They really
no,
do.
but once they get into the groove, they're just so much happier and way more settled. And then that communication that I kind of touched on before between the parent and the baby is just so much clearer.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
I can't.
yeah, everyone's happier.
Truly, I can't even count the amount of times I've like rocked Case and I'm like, just close your eyes. Like you're tired.
Uh,
Like that is why we're losing our mind. And then when they do finally fall asleep and their hearts are just going and you just hear them, oh, I'm like,
yeah,
okay, like you were so worked up. And then 20 minutes later, you're awake again.
yes. And it was like, what am I doing wrong? My gosh.
Yes.
So I remember the boys. So it was after Myra was born. So she was just like a newborn, like maybe a couple of weeks old. And the boys would have been like 3.5 type thing. So I took them to the open gymnastics play one morning. And I was just, I walked up to this group of moms and I was trying to start conversation. And I was like, so, like, when are these babies going to start sleeping? And it was like you could hear a pin drop. It was like they kind of like turned and like looked at me, and it was just like I was like, did they not hear like what's happening? And they were just like, what do you mean? And I was like, when are these babies like gonna start sleeping? And they one by one went and told me how great their babies slept and like all the things that they did. And I was just like, I felt so like stupid basically in that moment because
Mm-hmm.
I just did not feel seen by them at all. And then my brain was just racking through all the things that I was doing wrong. And like we said, we're not doing anything wrong. Every baby is just so different. And some babies sleep well. It's, people are just like, oh, sleep is natural. And yes, it is. But
Mm-hmm.
there's so much that goes into sleep. And the number one thing really is feeling that regulated nervous system is where that sleep really flows properly. And you think of even the like just the process of birth and everything. Like it is hard on both baby and parent. And some babies, depending on how things go, their little nervous systems can be more primed to the fight or flight
Mm-hmm.
pathway in their brain. That's even, one of the reasons why some babies don't sleep the greatest. You think of what measures were used in the birthing process, and that can definitely impact baby sleep. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just they'll sleep when they're tired, because as we know, if you know,
Mm-hmm.
they actually, in fact, do not sleep when they're tired because they were never really maybe fully tired because they're going off of this false sense of energy, which is those stress hormones. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
That's so true. I've never sat and like thought about how the birthing process would maybe affect them.
yeah,
Is what Jayla she just slept, and so I just
yeah.
assumed baby slept until
No, we don't.
I had friends that did not, and then yeah, Casey with his cat naps, and then he's up quite a bit during the night. And well, I think back to all the NICU stuff and all the pokes and the prods and the
Mhm.
I've just finally gotten him to be able to wear a toque because before, like, his CPAP hat was so tight that he didn't even want us touching his head or his hair. And so it's like all of those things that I, came across as they happened. I didn't necessarily think, oh, maybe that would affect, how he rests and digests.
Yeah. And because how early was he again?
He was born at 28 weeks, so he was a full 12 weeks early.
Oh my goodness. I had nephews
Mm-hmm.
born at 29 weeks. They were twins.
Mm-hmm.
They spent about 70 days in the NICU. How long were you guys there?
Oh, wow. 46.
Okay, that's still a very,
Yeah.
but you think of if a full term baby's nervous system is immature. Think of like a baby born prematurely. Their nervous system really isn't as
Mhm.
developed. And so that co regulation between caregiver and infant, and then you think of you also are going through a lot after that sort of, he's early, so you're stressing
Mhm.
and so there's like a like a mirroring of each other there too. And not that anyone is doing anything wrong. It was just a difficult situation and a challenging and at times probably scary. And so
Mhm.
yeah, that can absolutely impact sleep. And you think he was in the NICU where there's bright lights and loud noises. And
Yes.
it's crazy. What do they give them in the NICU that makes them sleep so good? And then you take them home the next day and they don't sleep. Like, what is it?
Mm.
Did you know that?
Right? I did struggle with that, but my struggle was because in the NICU in their incubator or their big boy beds, I called it, they always have like a towel wrapped around them.
Yeah,
And so they're cozied in as if they're still in the womb. And then you bring them home. And if you don't have them set up like that, like we put him right in his bassinet and he did not sleep. He was up every hour on the hour, feed for 30 minutes,
yeah,
sleep for 30. And for a few weeks, like I didn't sleep a wink. And then finally, I was like, "You know what? He's so little, he's not moving." I put some stuff in his bed and he slept like a sweet angel, but he needed like that
mhm,
coziness
mhm,
because if I put him in his swing or I put him in his lounger, he would go right
yeah,
to sleep. And so, but it's that exposure of them, and they were like, "What the heck?"
yeah,
But I mean, he was only like 35 weeks when we brought him home, and so he should have been in the womb for another 5 weeks.
yeah,
But I didn't even necessarily think about that, and then it definitely helped, but we've kind of regressed again, with that sleeping all night, and it's not even necessarily that he's waking up hungry, he just wants to be on the boob.
yes,
That's his happy place.
it is. He's a man.
Yeah, he's a true boy, this one.
Good boy. But even if babies aren't nursing or bottle feeding to sleep, it's just that rhythmic sucking motion is so soothing that that's
Yes.
doing a large majority of the work putting him to sleep. So that's where a lot of babies will often like snack all night long because they're just comfort
Mhm.
nursing. Uh, and yeah, that can get very tiring very quickly. Um, and then they're not as hungry during the day. Do you find that with him?
Sometimes, yeah. Like during the day, he's so scheduled with his eating. I know the moment he's going to want to eat and the moment he's going to want to fall asleep for a nap. And my husband would laugh at him because even in the NICU, he'd be laying there with nothing in his mouth, but it was like he was sucking on a soother.
Yeah.
And he would like use his tongue as a soother. He's
Oh,
like, "Is that normal? Like, why is he doing that?" I'm like, "He's like, it's a soothing thing."
yeah.
And he will do that now if he falls asleep. His soother eventually pops out of his mouth and he'll still be doing that
My
suckling.
daughter
Or I
still
notice,
does that.
yeah.
This
Yeah.
is what she does. She covers
Yep.
her mouth with her hand and just like, yeah, just makes that like she's 6 and that she'll be like getting ready for
Yeah.
bed and she'll just be like doing that. It's just the cutest thing.
Like the comfort thing, right? And I even notice like if I let him have a nap on the breast or whatever, it's like every 15 seconds, 20 seconds, it'll be like 3 suckles, relax.
Mhm.
3 suckles, relax.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so cute.
It really is.
And when parents are ready or when they feel their baby's ready, as long as they're 16 weeks adjusted age, you can
Mhm,
start giving them some time and space to find soothing techniques that don't
mhm.
involve you or your nipple.
Yes, it's so
Right?
overstimulating.
I know. Some
Oh,
babies might like kick their legs or like
mhm.
grunt or um, still do the sucking motion, but without an actual like bottle or like breast in their mouth.
Mhm.
Um, but that's again like always on parents' timelines, and
Yeah.
of course once baby's old enough. But yeah, it's hard. It's like you enjoy those moments, but you also just it feels like you're watching your house burn down around you.
Mhm.
Like
I
it's just
know.
piling up, and you're like, okay, then you like see this thing on Instagram that's like enjoy, and you're like, okay, I'm trying to enjoy, but it's like
Yeah.
we also need to like normalize not enjoying every moment.
Mhm.
Not enjoy every moment.
Yeah.
But I try to find moments to fully enjoy that. I kind of try to flip
Mhm.
it, where it's like, hey, I might not enjoy every moment, but can I in every day find moments to
Yeah.
fully enjoy? Because these days are fleeting. They truly are. And that doesn't mean that they're awesome all the time. They're hard, they're challenging. But here I am like 9 years later, and it's like, what? Like, where, like, when did that happen? Yeah,
Right? I know, and the days just go into each other. I'm like, I don't even know what day of the week it is or when that event happened. And
I know.
yeah, like enjoying those. And it's really forced me to slow down again. Like it was only Jayla and I well, and my husband
Yeah.
for 5 years, but I just got used to a quick rhythm and we just go and I have my schedule and we just do it. And then having a newborn again and a preemie on top of that, it was like really have to slow down again and accept that I can't just go full speed ahead anymore. And the few times a day I have to sit and hold him while he has like a solid good nap, that just forces me to sit and
Yeah.
rest for an hour or two, and like eventually, yeah, I'll have to break it. But there's also so much regulation for me, which I notice tremendously this time around. And I think that comes from healing my heart from loss and
Mhm.
everything else. But the way my body calmed down when I had him skin to skin around my chest, or even when I kiss him, I'm just like, oh, I just feel it's like inflammation leaving my body. Whereas with Jayla, obviously we were skin to skin tons, but I don't think it was as powerful for me back then, and I wish it was, so I would have held on to it a little bit more, but this time around, and I think I'm so much more aware
Mhm.
of not only how fast it goes,
Yeah.
but how important that skin to skin is and
Yeah.
just taking those times to slow down. And like you said, find the balance of enjoy, and you don't have to enjoy everything. Like people are like, "Oh, leave the mess, leave the dishes, leave this." And I'm like, I can't relax when there's chaos. Like at some point, I have to just do the thing so then I can enjoy the space.
It is that is so I have an ADHD brain. So, and I think all of us just do to some extent, but
Mhm.
like I have ADHD. And so um when there's a mess, I feel anxious. But then
Mhm.
there's that whole like, okay, but like learn, yeah, like you said, like learn to have it's like, okay, I'm working on that, but at the same time, because before, I just felt like I was on this hamster wheel of always trying to catch up to the mess. And with twin boys, my twin
Oh
boys
my
in
gosh.
particular, oh my God. Like if you think of one of them, just their personalities in general, it's like one cyclone. But when you have two cyclones going, they create their own cyclone as well. So it was just like, but that was the gift that they taught me was that you can you can go as fast as you can trying to clean up after them, and you will never, ever catch up. And I
Yeah.
burned myself out trying. And not that we have to fully give up, but it is that balance of like enjoying the chaos and learning to be okay in the chaos, but then also knowing what regulates us because we co-regulate with our children. So if we are getting caught up in that cyclone, we have to
Mhm.
ground ourselves. Um, and I know I wish I could go back to when they were little babies and I would breathe that time in a little bit more,
Mhm.
no matter how hard it is. I remember when we were leaving the hospital with them, a woman stopped me and she was just like, enjoy it because it goes so fast. And I was just like, why would I enjoy it? Like I slept 20 minutes combined. Like, how would I know?
Right.
But um at the time it feels like it's never gonna end. But it does. And so it's just being like, okay, how can I sit within that and still be okay?
Mhm.
Instead of,
And it's hard to do when, yeah, you're tired, you're postpartum hormones,
oh,
you're healing, you're all over the board, you're learning this new person times two. And for me too, I was chasing my kids around all the time cleaning up, but I also want them to feel comfortable being able to play and explore and learn. And it's okay to make a mess and clean it up. I don't want them to think back on their childhood and be like, oh my God, mom was chasing me around all the time, like a vacuum.
Yeah.
Like, no, she actually sat and played and enjoyed. And, but again, it's the balance. And every day is going to be a little bit different depending on, what mental state you're in, how much you slept, like, what are your triggers that day, that kind of thing. And just to give yourself space and permission to
Mm.
do a little bit of both. I think we all have such expectations on ourselves, not as only as women, but especially as moms. And sometimes we need to just let those expectations, soften even just a little bit so that
Yeah.
we can try and enjoy and try and soak in and just accept that right now this is how it is and it's not going to be this way forever. I always see the thing, it's like you're going to miss all the toys, you're going to miss the baby equipment and all of this, and you truly do. Like,
Yeah.
it's so special to have it all over my living room again. But also, I just telling my girlfriend the other day, she's like, I cannot wait to have all this baby stuff. I'm like, yeah, it's great, but holy, is it overwhelming at the
Oh
same
my
time?
gosh, it is. But now it's like it's been out of my house for so long, it seems. Yeah,
I know.
I also think it's important to acknowledge, and this is something that a lot of parents struggle with because I think that they think as soon as they have children that number one, they're supposed to be experts in all areas, including sleep. And two,
Hmm.
that like, welcome to the jungle. Like, this is just the way it is now.
Hmm.
And that's not true. It's not true. And I think you have to recognize your limit. And if you're noticing that, you know what, okay, I'm utterly exhausted. I'm not a sleep expert, and that's okay. I'm not supposed to be. Just like I'm not an expert in a lot of things, right? But in this area I am. And so when we think of a village, it just looks a little bit different than it used to. And so it's so
Hmm.
important to acknowledge like, okay, you know what? I'm actually so tired and I do need sleep for so that I can be the mom that I want to be and know I can be. And just recognizing when it's time to seek out support and
Yeah.
prioritize that because there's no badge of honor for the most exhausted mom because we're all exhausted.
Mhm.
Even if you're getting a full night's sleep, you're still exhausted. So it's like, why would you start the day on an empty tank and expect yourself to do all these things and then feel like you're the failure for not being able to when you actually just started off empty already? So yeah, I don't know. It's just like a lot of just kind of accepting where you're at, but also accepting what you need moving forward. And for a lot of us, that is sleep. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just because you get sleep doesn't mean that you're any less of a mom. just
Right.
you just have acknowledged what you need to be the mom that you want to be or the dad
Hmm.
or whatever. But
And I think too, like when we think about having newborns and babies and things like that, it's almost you anticipate not having sleep and you're like, okay, well, they're not really supposed to sleep, perfectly. And so this is normal. And then at what point do you lose the sense of normal when you were literally getting no sleep? You're like, well, I guess this is just what having a baby is.
yeah, but then we also start to get irritable and like
Hmm.
if we were to say to a mom, "Oh, you just don't get to drink water after you have a baby. That's just the way it is." Like we would actually die.
Yeah.
Water, food, sleep, air, like those are
Hmm.
non-essentials. Yet when it comes to sleep, like obviously you can't live for many days without water, a couple weeks without food. But we seem to think we can live years without sleep. And it's like, well, technically you're alive, but like
Are you
you're
living?
not living and you need it. So to deprive yourself of that and be like, oh, like I'm selfish for wanting or needing sleep. It's like, actually, no, we're humans. We
Mhm.
need it. And it's just not as obvious as lacking food, water, or air.
Yeah.
So we think it's a
Yeah.
luxury, but it's not.
Mhm. And I think the mentality of modern day is that the busier you are, the less sleep you're getting, the more you're grinding, the more successful you're going to be.
Oh,
And I remember when I was working nights and days after I graduated nursing school, and it was like, okay, yeah, I'm going from this job and then I'm gonna have a nap when I get to that job, and then I'll start that job. And eventually I did crash and burn, and I really honestly don't think I ever recovered. And it's been about 3 years. But just it's no different when we have those babies at home. Like we need, again, it's the boundaries and the trying to figure out the routine and our new normal. And there's a fine line between, abnormal and normal when it comes to this, and just trying to find your new normal,
Yeah.
whatever that may look like. I've seen a lot lately about for adults, like you mentioned, you know, staying up late, you're up earlier. And then I find it's always like at a certain point of the day, I could fall asleep the moment I close my eyes, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm absolutely going to bed early tonight."
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's 11 o'clock. I've had the most energy I've had ever. And there's so much talk about like resetting the circadian rhythms and stuff like that these days, and the different lights you can get, the light bulbs and things like that. And I've had a lot of people that have been successful with it. But is that something that would work for like babies, children, that kind of thing? Like having you can get special like light bulbs that have different lights depending on the different timing of the day. Is that a thing?
I'm sure it is. I'm not
Mhm.
overly educated on that area.
Yeah.
Natural light is the best source of light, and obviously
Mhm.
we don't have a ton of it in the winter, but getting that natural light into your system, when you wake
Mhm.
up, getting that, like opening the blind, like getting that, because that is what signals to your body that it is morning time. And watching, I mean, if we went by Canadian winters, we'd all be sleeping by 4:30. So we
Right.
kind of are like messing with our own circadian rhythm a little bit just by because of where we live. It's harder. But I mean, yes, you can use different lights and things like that, but they're also just, it is a fake essentially, right? So the more
Mhm.
natural light you can get, the better.
Yep.
But I don't know if that totally answers your question. I don't know a ton about that. I do know, the happy light, and yes,
Mhm.
are tools, but they shouldn't replace the real stuff.
No, I think that answers it perfectly.
Touching the earth, like planting your feet
Yeah.
down, summer
Yes.
day,
Yep.
get your feet in the dirt, in like
Mhm.
on the grass. Same with babies, like get them touching those things. And then
Mhm.
as evening starts, closing in, dimming the lights in your home, like that is a real thing. Like, and
Mhm.
turning off. I know it's kind of hard. It's so hard. We like to scroll social media, but does
Oh
anyone
my god,
actually
for
feel
real.
better doing that?
No.
I don't. And then that blue light is so tricky because it's similar to like natural light in a sense, that
Mhm.
blue slash white light. And so it's telling your brain that it's morning, but it's actually right before bed. And then it has a harder time falling asleep. So even if you're in bed at say 10 o'clock at night, but you're scrolling your phone or whatever, you can't you can't turn off. It takes hours to actually turn off.
Mhm.
So we fight again. We just, yeah, we're no better than babies in that sense, really. We
We're more
don't
guilty if anything, because we can tell time. They cannot. We can, and we can control it. And we're out here choosing
yeah,
not
we're like,
to.
oh, but love is blind. I need to see what it's like. It's all the same.
Um,
It's all
yeah, what is this celebrity doing versus I should probably have fallen asleep 2 hours
I
ago.
know too much about Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni at this point.
I'm guilty of that
No,
too.
too much. If you know too much about Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, it's a sign you need to go to bed early.
Yeah, go to bed earlier.
Go to bed. Like nobody feels better after scrolling their phones ever.
No.
Yet I'm just like, oh, what's the tea on these Love is
Mhm.
Blind? It's like, again, it's the same thing. It's it's pretty much fake for the most part. Yes, there's true love stories, but for the most part, a lot of these couples seem like they're perfect in the pods. And it's
Mhm.
just like, why do I need to watch the same thing over and over? And that really comes down to like the slowing down and being mindful as well, being like, do I feel good after I do this? Like, is this helping
Mhm.
me? Is this because, yeah, babies might self sabotage as well, but we at least are, they don't realize they're doing it. We know we're doing it
Mhm.
and we choose to do it anyways. So, like, you can buy all the lights you want, but like, if you're not actually gonna do the things, it's not going to work.
I love that answer. That was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I seen the other day, it was like, I forget who shared it, but it was like a bunch of different professions and how they feel about swaddling. And depending on who you talk to, they were into it or not into it. And I couldn't imagine having a newborn at home and not swaddling
Oh,
them because
either.
they would literally not sleep. What is your take on swaddling?
I think a swaddle is fantastic.
Hmm.
Whenever um, friends or family have babies, I gift them with a swaddle. I really like the Ollie swaddle because if you can start swaddling right from the hospital, like 'cause when they swaddle at the hospital, like I can't do that. Um, those nurses there are just I cannot
They
swaddle.
have special training.
They do. They do. Again, we expect ourselves. I'm like, why am I not an expert in this? This is the third time I've ever done it.
Hmm.
But it's like their 10,000th. But that's why, and if they become unwound, right? That's a loose blanket. So we're trying to create as healthy of sleep as we can and safe. So I like the Ollie swaddle. There's a lot of swaddles I like, but that's just one that I found that I've liked. And if you can start swaddling right from birth, basically, then baby doesn't know any different. And they actually, it just feels so womb like to them. People will
Hmm.
say, like, my baby doesn't like being swaddled. And perhaps that's true. But I think if you're not swaddling them for a bit and then try to swaddle again, then they're just like, what the hell is this? Right.
Yeah.
And to us, we're like, oh, I would hate my arms being kind of like strapped down, whatever. But babies are so used to being like condensed and it
Hmm.
is comforting for them. Um,
Yeah, because it's that startle reflex too,
it
right? And
is. And
my kids were always like had their hands like
mm,
kind of on their chest. It wasn't that I had them like a corpse in
yeah.
their swaddle and the arms had to be a certain way. Like it's
Mhm.
just it's like a little hug for them is
Yeah.
how I view it.
Yeah.
And so I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if their work, you know what? If that is helping, especially during that newborn phase when you're trying to sleep, like you're healing, you're recovering, you're adjusting to life with a baby, like no one can prepare you for what that's like.
Mm-mm.
It's, yeah. So if that's something that works, 100%, I stand by it. I think some babies who maybe don't like being swaddled would be maybe if through delivery like there's just something out, like maybe they want
Hmm.
hip dysplasia or I'm
Yeah.
not sure, then maybe they'd feel uncomfortable, but I think they'd be uncomfortable regardless. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, I'm all for it. And even soothers and things like that, I am very much like find what works for you, especially during those
Hmm.
challenging times. You can always make changes. You can always, when baby's 4 months, be like, okay, I've adjusted now somewhat and I'm ready to make some changes, but you've got to really prioritize everyone in the household getting as much sleep as possible at first. So
Hmm.
find whatever helps with that. But yeah.
And I feel like the first 4 months too is so important of getting to know your baby,
Mhm.
getting to know their cues, their cries, their like what routine they're setting out for themselves is always what I focus on. And all of a sudden, I'm just like, oh yeah, he likes to nap at this time, this time, this time. I'm like, when did I even learn that? It was like just going through the day, and eventually he kind of just figured it out on his timing and things
Yeah.
like that. And something that shocked me, and granted, he had a full blown tongue tie, but I just assumed every baby loved a soother, but he could not take one forever until we got like an oral assessment and everything done. And so that alone threw me for a loop. So I'm like, well, how are you going to soothe yourself if you're not going
No.
to take a Seuss?
My baby, none of them took soothers, which was a blessing. In it's like I have a love-hate relationship with soothers. I think that they can
Hmm.
be tools. They can get you through those tough times, but eventually you do have to take them away. And so, if your baby never took to the soother, then there's nothing to take away.
True that.
Ourselves to get because it's hard if your baby doesn't take a soother. Like I have lots of friends who'll just like, yeah, plunk a soother in, and I'm just like, what is that like to have something you
Hmm.
can rely on? I've never had that.
It's so funny. When I was cased before we got his tongue tie released and everything, if someone was going to watch him quick for me or they were struggling, I'm like, hey, where's the soother? I'm like, oh, he doesn't take one. In the panic on their
Like,
faces.
what?
What do you mean he doesn't take
What do you
one? I'm like,
mean?
He just doesn't. Like, I don't know, he'll just fall asleep. And now he does, and he loves it, but only certain ones, and they have to be the right ones and whatever. He's a picky boy, but
There's even
it
a
is
lot of
what it
babies
is.
love going in their car seat, and if you go for a drive,
Mhm.
my boys screamed bloody murder the whole time that they were in their
Oh.
car seats. The only thing that would soothe them when we were driving was heavy metal music.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was all. Like, I would, like, have my country on, and they would just be like and I would, like, turn it up to kinda, like, drown out because, like, you have to drive places.
Yeah.
And my husband was like, "Well, it's because they don't like country." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Check this out," like, puts on AC/DC and just, like, crickets in the back.
No.
What? Yeah. So, I guess
Your husband's probably held on to that moment for,
oh,
like, the rest of his life,
always.
like,
He was
"Oh,
just
I knew something
my
she
boys. And
didn't."
I was like, "Not only did you get 2 boys, they also like heavy metal music." And they have like, their personalities couldn't be more like, it's just that gave me a big glimpse into what to expect from them because that's just them.
Oh my
Or
gosh,
like
that is so
like
funny.
heavy metal music, so that's just them. But so those of you listening, if soothers don't work for you, swaddles don't work, try AC/DC.
We all like it just a little
Just
bit,
a
but
little
some of
bit,
these
just
babies.
a little.
Oh my gosh, that is so
Try a
funny.
different genre of music, see if that helps.
Yeah, switch it up once in a while.
Speaking of, like, music or white noise is kind of what's coming to mind, and I
Yes.
often get questions about this. I am a huge white noise fan, but parents are concerned that if they have white noise for their baby, that they will only sleep when there's white noise. And that I haven't found that to be the case. There's studies out there that kind of, quote unquote, prove one way or another. I don't know if you can prove anything, but
Mhm.
I just think, like, for me, when I sleep, I do sleep better if there's like a fan or something going
Agreed.
and it blocks out that noise. I can sleep without a fan, but I sleep better when the fan is blocking out the sounds of my orangutan sons, who like to get up at whatever time. So, uh, yeah, white noise, huge fan of white noise, and something continuous and boring like an ocean wave or a fan. Sometimes
Mhm.
parents will play lullabies,
Mm,
but that's actually really stimulating to the brain. So it can wake babies up more because it's not rhythmic, it's always changing. And so it's not predictable, whereas like ocean waves or fan sound will really kind of it's just gets into the rhythm, you know what I mean?
mhm.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, that was just a sidebar that I was thinking of, but I wouldn't
No,
recommend AC/DC
absolutely.
music while sleeping.
No, that's just like for a nice car ride or jumping in the jolly jumper. Oh my god, I gotta try that with Case because he currently like jumps and he'll try and jump as high as he can. I can only imagine if he had some rock and roll ready to go.
We used
Okay, I'm
to have
doing it.
both boys in the bouncer side by side, and they'd listened. I don't know if you've heard of like Crazy Frog on YouTube. They
Yes.
loved Crazy Frog, and they
Oh
just
my
like give her.
oh my gosh, that's literally so cute. I just bought a white noise machine not too long ago, and then I have a certain one on my phone that I'll play if I'm not like putting him in his bed. And it is crazy
Mhm.
how the moment it starts, it's like, oh, his eyes
Classical
go. I'm like,
conditioning. Yeah.
what is happening? And why can I not go to sleep that fast?
Yeah. Teach me.
Like immediately. I'm like, what is this triggering in your brain that is literally just okay, we go to sleep now.
No, it's like hypnotizing. So when we went, Myra was just a baby, and we went to Mexico, and obviously I brought along the white noise machine because
Mhm.
hotels and like resorts are very loud. And my husband was like, "There is no way we're sleeping with that thing in our room." And I was just like, "We have to." By like night 3, he was just like, "We need one of these in our room."
Mhm.
And it is like classical conditioning. So it's just like babies, whenever it's sleep time, you have this. And so like when you start playing that sound, it just like the yawns start, and it just triggers and sends that message to them because we can't say to a baby like, "Okay, it's nap time." Like we can say it, but they don't understand for a very long time. But what they can understand is our routines and like the white noise and things like that that
Mhm.
associate um, are associated with sleep. So that's one of the hugest ways we can communicate to babies that it's sleep time is through white noise.
I love that. My husband still gives me a hard time. He goes, "That sounds so annoying."
Not enough.
Whatever. So I'm marching upstairs after this. I'm like, yeah, well, this, and that's why we have it. So we're not getting rid of
Exactly,
it.
because we are loud and like unless you live in a house surrounded by like soundproofing, you need a white noise.
Hmm.
There's neighbors, there's like if you're going to go to bed at the same time as your baby every night, and if you only have the one child and your house is soundproof, then you would be okay to not need some sort of way to block sound. But
Hmm.
if you have any of the above, your baby's likely waking up because
Yeah,
there's too
true
much
that.
noise. But even
It gave me,
dead silence, that is sometimes louder than that.
yeah, like I can't sleep in when there's absolutely nothing going on. And I had white noise through my daughter, and I just like not used it because I got it as a gift. Didn't really think anything of it. And then with Case, I was like, oh, I don't think we really need it. And then my girlfriend used it for one night and it really helped. I'm like, okay, I'll give in. And now they both give me a hard time. So like, oh, what's that? Is that your white noise?
Yes, you're like, "Yes, it
I'm like,
is.
yes.
Yes, I know." Try to resist it, but you can't resist it. You can't.
No, I had to give in.
Yeah,
And I'll admit, I love it.
yes. I don't know
So for
why
me,
we fight it so hard.
oh, I know. I think it's just something different, something we aren't used to. And then it's just like another thing that you're inviting into your life that is already turned so upside down.
Mhm.
And then until you know the benefits and see what it can do for these babies, it's just another thing to have to kind of do, maybe.
Okay,
I don't
yes,
know.
I ask everyone who's listening, do you sleep better on a hot like, on a summer night when you can open your window and listen to it raining? Or if you're on holidays
Hmm.
where you can hear the ocean waves, like, do you sleep better with that? Because white noise is the closest you can get to that,
Hmm.
unless you just live by the ocean or where it rains every night.
Must be nice.
Yeah,
Can I come visit?
you live where it's -50 and your face hurts and your skin peels.
Yeah, the only thing I can hear is the snowblower from my neighbor.
Yeah, okay, okay, well, that is a white noise in and of its own, except for it's like
Yes.
it's not very
Sounds stimulating.
no, it's not. It's not comforting at all. And then you just know there's just
Oh
like
my god.
snow waiting for you, and you're just like, if anything, but it's like that's like the opposite of white noise. That's like causes anxiety hearing that thing.
Yeah, like, I think I'll just stick with my little machine that I bought from Walmart.
Yeah, I listen like just like rain sound on my phone.
Mm,
I love and all night long. My husband,
yeah.
when he comes, will sometimes turn it off, but I just listen to rain sounds on repeat. Maybe that's just
For
like a
me,
way
it's
of
the
coping
ocean.
with this weather. I'm just like, oh,
Yes.
ocean for sure. I love
Yeah.
ocean. But I find that
Yeah.
sometimes like on an app, like on YouTube or something, ocean waves sound weird.
Oh, yeah. Mine had my, like, white noise machine has an ocean
Yeah.
setting, and it's like I like that it's a deep noise, and I think it's finding a white noise that works for you too, because I had some that were, like, too high pitched,
Mhm.
and it gave me so much anxiety. I was so overwhelmed. And then I like heard the deep one and I'm like, okay, now I'm like, oh, I was almost craving it.
Yeah.
It was like immediately soothed me while I was awake. And now I'm like, oh, I just like need that again. So it's like finding the right sound for you too, right? Like don't just buy a machine and be like, oh, this is what white noise is. Like there's so
Yeah.
many different white noise. There's pink noise, there's white noise, there's
Brown
this. I'm
noise.
like,
And
what?
I cannot tell you, like, I cannot tell you what the differences are, to be honest. I really can't.
No.
There's pink noise,
It's
white noise, brown noise. Like, there's all these different ones. And I'm just like, I think people are just making shit up at this point. But
literally.
um, and I also would say get a good portable white noise machine. You can bring it in the
Yes.
vehicle. You can hang it in the car seat. You can hang it
Mhm.
in the slumber pod if you're staying somewhere like a slumber pod. It's like a pop up tent basically around the
Mhm.
playpen. And like YouTube, yes, you can use that in a pinch, but an actual white noise machine just has so much more depth to the sound. Whereas YouTube,
Yes.
I don't know. frequencies, really sound and frequencies, all of that, there's so much science behind it. And if you can,
Mm-hmm.
when you find a good quality, oh, there's Mildred is here. She's kind of saying,
Oh, hello, sweet girl.
when you find a good quality sound, similar to AC/DC with my boys, it really just calms the nervous system.
Whatever works. Find what works for you.
Yeah.
So you talk a lot about safe sleep. What exactly does safe sleep entail? Like, if a first-time mom was like, what is considered safe sleep?
Okay, so according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, like nothing is safe. So it's like
Okay.
just a
Perfect.
bed sheet. Like they're like, because we live in like the type of world where people sue you over every little thing, right? So they're like,
Mm-hmm.
according to this, nothing is safe. And legally, I am bound to talk about that. And yes, I agree. But I also think there's something called like safer sleep, where it's like, how can I
Mm-hmm.
make this safer or as safe as possible? So I think, when Myra was a baby, co-sleeping was all that would work to get sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And getting sleep is safer than zero sleep, because if you're getting zero sleep, number one, um, like you can fall asleep and there, you can't really even go into everything, but it is so important
Yeah.
for parents to get sleep too, right? So, yeah, we co-slept, but it's like, how could we make it safer? And that would be like, if you are co-sleeping, um, reducing numbers of blankets and pillows,
Mm-hmm.
kicking the husband out basically, because you want to reduce the number of people in the bed, things like that. Obviously, making sure you're not smoking or drinking or doing some sort of
Yeah.
drug, because that is a risk factor. But yeah, you have to kind of look at it case by case basis, on a case by
Mm-hmm.
case basis. Um, and so I'm not sure if that totally answers your question, but according to the guidelines, yeah, like it's literally like a mattress with a sheet, like a fitted
Mm-hmm.
sheet.
Yes, not a loose one.
And that is it, right? And so
Yeah.
you have to kind of, like you said, like with your little guy, where you're like, he literally
Mm-hmm.
wasn't sleeping. And so you're like, he's not moving, and you kind of found
Yeah.
ways to put things maybe down even over his like little feet or something,
Mm-hmm.
weigh that down. And even like according to those guidelines, like weighted sleep sacks aren't considered safe.
Oh,
But if you look at like,
interesting.
okay, if I was to put my hand on an infant's chest, I don't see how that, like, at any point, that is not going to hurt them. Like, it's just like tapping,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you have this really gently weighted sleep sack, that is no heavier than just like a hand tapping. So it's like, how is that?
Yep.
But nobody wants to say, oh, it's safe, and then be sued a bazillion times. So the answer is
Fair enough.
basically nothing's safe. Now you can't sue me. But that is not helping parents out, because, and then there's so much judgment, like whenever I meet with parents, I'm just like, there is zero judgment here. We're all doing
Mm-hmm.
the best we can, and getting sleep is safer than not getting sleep. So let's find a way to make it as safe as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I co-slept with Myra, I probably did get a lot of judgment for that. But unless you've been in that situation, like it's usually those unicorn sleepers that are the parents are the judgiest, where they're like, all you have to do is like put your baby in the crib and they fall asleep. It's like, oh, really? I haven't tried that.
Yeah, thank you,
What else
Captain
do you have?
Obvious.
Thanks, tips. Like, yeah. So it's just, how can you make it safer?
Mm-hmm.
Best. And yeah.
I think it's so personal preference too. And I know for myself, I've always been so scared of co-sleeping. And even so more now, I think just with my post-loss anxiety and things like that. And I was just like so scared that something was going to happen to him. But eventually, same thing. I was like, I can't just keep getting up at night and going and rocking him and then putting him back and doing it multiple times a night when he could literally, like, I just cut my arm and he lays there and then he just literally latches on whenever he needs a little
Yeah.
milk or whatever. But it's, and again, like, I don't even know if that's necessarily helping me because I am sleeping, but it's not like your deep sleep because then I'm always making sure like, oh, is he okay? Is he good? Like, so those kinds of things. But there is so much judgment with co-sleeping, and it is obviously there we do need to be hyper aware of it, and it does need to create, I think, a little bit of anxiety so you keep your baby safe, but learning how to do those. And I think again, a person of your position that is working with these women to be open to creating a safe environment, maybe whatever that looks like to an extent. Because that was one of the questions I got when I asked, like, oh, what would you want to ask a sleep
Mhm.
coach, was how can you avoid having to co-sleep? And so again, if you believe and it's your wish that you don't want to, then yes, let's focus on the how not to's.
Mhm.
However, in the next breath, focus on the how to's at the same time.
So many sleep coaches that I know of will not even talk about co-sleeping.
Hmm.
They are like, nope. And legally, yes, I do have to talk about safe sleep, but I'm also
Yes.
like, I want to be a safe space for parents. And I don't want to be
Hmm.
like, oh, like, and this judgy hoe, like,
Yeah.
absolutely not. I've been there.
Hmm.
Oh, and if you think of the safety issues surrounding a parent who's not sleeping, we can dive into
Yep.
that. If you Let's cast like a wider net, if you will. So if a
Hmm.
mom isn't sleeping, or a dad, but mostly moms are listening to this, so I'm just going to say moms.
Yep.
Um, our mental health plummets. So you're looking
Hmm.
at postpartum depression. You're looking at postpartum psychosis, things like that that can happen if a mom isn't sleeping. That, while it may not immediately, I'm not going to say that, regardless of how am I trying to word this? Sorry, you might need to edit this out a little bit.
No, you're
Because
good.
it might not seem like that would, from an outsider, impact the baby, but 100% it does. It might not
Hmm.
be, it might not be like instant, but that builds up and builds up and builds up. And then you have a mom who's super anxious and depressed and possibly psychosis and
Hmm.
um, maybe even neglectful to the baby, right? Things like that. Or just an emotional
Hmm.
wreck. Like you need, you need that. So if we cast a wider net, but as we come closer and closer, you're looking at parents who might fall asleep and like literally pass out in unsafe, you're like behind the wheel, right? Things like that.
Hmm.
So parents sleeping is 100% safer than them not sleeping. So I think of
Hmm.
Myra. If I put her in a crib, she would scream, like she would just scream and cry the whole night. If I brought her in with me, I might not sleep the greatest, but it was better than it was. But at least then she is sleeping so that I'm not like, you think of shaking baby syndrome. I remember when we had the boys, I'd see these
Hmm.
posters in the hallway. I'm like, who would shake a baby? Like, what's wrong with you? But you get into that position where you haven't slept for months. Think of if you
Hmm.
hadn't eaten in weeks. Like you're not yourself. Your brain is
Yeah.
just not working the way it's not rational. So if you're so frustrated in those moments, yeah, that can happen. You get so just worked up and just angry, and those sorts of things happen. So
Hmm.
how can we make it safer? And sleeping with a
Right.
duvet, probably not the greatest, but that's where I would say to those listening, wear, like I'm wearing a sweatsuit today. You could wear that to bed, then that way maybe you don't even need a blanket. And then it's kind of hard, but you can kind of make like a C shape with your body, right? So,
Yeah.
so your knees are bent, and it kind of creates this little cove for babies to lay in.
Yep.
And your elbows are bent, so you're not going to roll over your infant in that position. And I know, yes, there's people who there is, that margin of error where, yeah, maybe they could roll over, but realistically speaking, we're very hyper aware
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way it is as moms. I don't know about you, but I could hear sounds more
Yep.
intensely. Yeah, we're just more hyper aware. The chance of
Yep.
us rolling over, I could see more if like a spouse was in bed because
Mm-hmm.
they're not as like we're the one typically taking care of baby. They're not as in tune to that. I'm not saying that I'm not trying to paint the spouse as like this horrible, this picture of them, but basically we are just very in tune with our infant's needs. The chances of that happening are very slim. Not saying that it's not possible, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that we build it up in our heads as like, if I fall asleep, I'm going to roll over and this is going to happen. And the reality is that it's more likely not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So just trying to set yourself up for the safest sleep environment possible. I hope that kind of answers that question. But yeah,
No, it
reduce
does.
the number of people in bed. And also, when baby starts to roll and things like that, you need to maybe look at a different sleep environment because once baby is rolling and things like that, they can roll off the edge of the bed. So, but for that first little bit, the first couple months when baby's stationary, it's not, you don't have that risk of them rolling off.
Mm-hmm.
But I do not
Yeah,
want,
that C shape was very like natural for me. When I started it, it was like immediately, oh, that's just my body cups them, it's
exactly.
such a natural
It
instinct.
is. And so many cultures and so many places around the world, that is all they do is co-sleep. It really is more,
Mm-hmm.
like Canada, the US, things like that, that really talk about not co-sleeping. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that to say there's no one size fits all,
Yep.
right? And so if that's what someone chooses to do, I would love to have that conversation rather than shame them and not give them the education that they
Mm-hmm.
are looking for. So yeah, like I said, legally I do have to talk about safe sleep, but I'm also a mom. I'm not just a sleep coach. I'm also a mom and I'm a human. I
Mm-hmm.
get it that we're all doing the best that we can. So
And I think it's important to come from both like approaches too of, the safe sleep that you're legally bound to, but also the relative part of like, okay, but I also understand and I've been there. So let's meet in the middle and do this or try this. And you know, there's not one size fits all in anything with these little babies. And I remember being pregnant and just imagining what my baby would be like. And then they come out and they're just their own person. And you are like, okay, this is not what I anticipated this to be like.
yeah,
And instead of, yeah, bringing it back onto yourself, it's important to kind of analyze the entire situation. It's nothing you're doing.
yeah,
You are not the one keeping your baby awake unless you're there banging some pots and pans together or something. And I mean, okay, yeah, you're at fault. But other than that, like your baby doesn't tell time. Your baby, they're just there figuring out this world just as you are.
yeah. And I also think like the irony in you think of like online or the judgment. It's like you're judged
Mhm.
for co-sleeping, you're judged for sleep training. It's like no matter what we do, we're judged. And
Yep.
uh, but we just got to find what works for us. And that's brings me to the whole judgment around sleep training. Like I said, there's some misconceptions around it. And absolutely, there are some people who, I've met sleep coaches who say when you're sleep training, if a baby cries for 2 hours, they cry for 2 hours, and that's just not what I necessarily agree with. Um, and but that's okay if a parent is okay with that. I mean, you can go that way, but that's I am more with in the mindset of yes, a baby, especially an overtired baby, will fuss or cry. But it is our job absolutely to go and check on them and soothe them and things like that. But I would love to have that conversation with somebody,
Hmm.
because there's lots of different ways to do it. But I kind of back to what I said at the beginning, I really do think it's so important to know our boundaries and what we feel to be true. Because you think of a minute of your baby crying feels like an hour. And
Hmm.
it's supposed to, because in a sense, because it's our biological inclination to nurture and to comfort. And if we're
Yep.
going against that, that creates a lot of anxiety. But when all those pieces of the sleep puzzle come together, it's amazing how smooth the sleep coaching process truly is. But I think people think it's like, oh my God, I have to leave my baby to cry for hours and I need someone to like quote unquote hold me accountable for that. And it's just like, I'm not holding you accountable to anything you don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's like I will be there to guide you through what does a routine look like? What does sleep environment look like? What are wake windows? How do we know where to start or how to make adjustments? But my job is not to force parents into doing anything they don't want to do or hold them accountable for letting their baby cry when they don't feel comfortable with that.
Yep.
That's not what it is. And so I think it really is just finding if people are looking for support when it comes to sleep, finding someone who has the same mindset around it as you and someone who you feel supported by. Um, because regardless of what decision we make, there's going to be maybe judgment or misunderstanding around it. And it's just finding what works for you.
Yeah. I feel like no matter what we do, there's always going to be
Oh,
somebody that
mhm.
doesn't agree. And I think just having somebody that is literally just willing to meet you where you are at and not expect you to be in a place, like for me to be in a place where you think I should be. It's like you're there to help me get to that place,
Yeah,
which,
absolutely.
I mean, we talk about dating our providers, and you need to date everybody in your life, like, and find the person that's perfect for you and that you can really build that relationship and that wants this as badly for you as you want it for yourself.
Yeah.
Like
I
become a
saw
team.
I recently saw this post online and in the sleep world there's lots of black and white thinking. There's a lot of people like, oh, it's all their judgments and all their unicorn babies and they don't get it. Um but one thing that I really want people to think about is yes, okay, so if you think about like a baby crying or fussing or whatever you want to call it, an overtired baby is cries way more and is way fussier than 2 or 3 nights of sleep coaching, if you think about it, right? So it's like if a baby's
Yeah.
overtired, they're dysregulated. If you added together in a 24-hour period the amount of crying, but then you looked at like the first couple nights of sleep training or the first couple days of it, it's like there might on average be a little bit more because we are changing the game, so to speak, for your
Mm-hmm.
babies. But then they're happy and like the amount of fussing and crying reduces drastically. Like just during awake time, all of it. And I just fail to see how that is harming or how that is like you got some people who are like, oh, it's child abuse. It's just like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Like when they're dysregulated and they're exhausted and they're sleep deprived and they're just all over the map, if you continue down that path, that actually impacts growth and development and mood
Mm-hmm.
much more than, and again, I'm not trying to say like, yes, you need to leave your baby crying for 3 hours. It's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying that if we're changing how our baby is sleeping and how they're going to sleep and things like that, like we're changing, so say you normally bottle feed or nurse your baby to sleep and then you're getting up 9 times at night. It's like, yeah, you know, um, maybe there's less crying because you're immediately going to the infant rather than giving them 10 minutes or 15 minutes to self soothe. But if they're not getting the sleep they need, they're so irritable and they're so fussy and they're crying so much more than just a few maybe challenging first few days of sleep coaching. Like
Mm-hmm.
it can be so smooth and just kind of back to the misconceptions around it. It's fascinating, really, actually, the amount of misinformation around it.
Well, that's just it, right? And that's why I think it's important. Like, I talk about this pretty sure in every episode, the importance of socials and whether it's a positive or negative impact, and to have people out there spreading the proper information is so important. And just having that, even the testimonies of these moms and things like that, that are willing to kind of share their experiences. And that just helps, the education piece, the awareness piece.
Yeah.
It's, we need to be having those conversations, which I guess is why we find ourselves here today, is to have someone that's willing to speak out, right? And like, it takes a certain person to do every job. And I think you have to have that passion and that love for what you're doing, especially when it comes to this. And as a parent who, dealt with a baby that wasn't going to just sleep perfectly and things like that, it's special to have you in this position to support these moms, not only with your professional experiences and knowledge, but also your personal.
Yeah, I think, um, if I look at my career as a kindergarten teacher or in
Mm-hmm.
general, I did love it and I did feel fulfilled by it. But there's something so different about doing this, and it's because of the personal experience behind it. I get it. Um, I've suffered through it, and it was not pretty for me. There were a lot of, and I started taking medications, all those things, but that will only do so much if we are not
Mm-hmm.
getting that proper rest. We need that, and we need to model to our children that it's important to take care of ourselves too. If we burn the candle at both ends, but then tell our children to, self care, it's like what? Like if you're not
Mm-hmm.
doing it, if you're not showing it, then you're not actually teaching that. And so if you think of like, say you have a little girl or a little boy one day who is a parent who's exhausted, and what would you tell them? Would you tell them that's just the way it is and suffer through it? Or would you say, actually, there's a much easier way and it's a lot easier than you think it is to
Mm-hmm.
find someone who can help you with that? But like you
Yeah.
said, you date your provider. I always meet Zoom over or FaceTime with clients because we need to make sure that we jive. We are partners. And it's not me telling you to do a certain thing, it's us giving that back and forth. And so you need to make sure that you find someone who you feel aligned with. And if you don't, just keep looking. There's lots of awesome sleep coaches out there. And if, say we were to meet and you felt like we didn't jive, that's fine. You're not
Mm-hmm.
going to with every person. But when you are seeking support from someone, you definitely have to. So
Yeah,
keep looking.
exactly. And I love that you have that perspective too. I think that that's important, and that aids in that comfortability of people, right? And it's a zero pressure zone.
It
Like
is zero
you,
pressure.
yeah.
And I think people are hesitant to reach out thinking that it's like this sales pitch or whatever. But it's just having a conversation and listening to
Mm-hmm.
what's going on and being like, okay, first and foremost, do we jive well? And do I feel like this is something I could help with? If it's not, I
Mm-hmm.
will let you know. If I'm like, ooh, this is not something I'm okay. Like for instance, I, worked with a 7-year old boy a few months ago, and that was something I'd never worked with a child that old before. So I was like, I think I can help, but I also have never worked with a 7-year old before. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to try. I'm willing to work with you guys. And I can never make promises, but especially in this situation, I've never done this. So I truly can't, you know, make you think that I can for sure help out with this. And they chose to work with me anyways, and it was a success. And so now
Mm-hmm.
maybe there'll be a 9-year-old child.
Yeah.
But there's a first for everything. And I'm always so honest. If I don't think that it's something that I'm confident with, or if I'll just always be honest, I will always be honest
Mm-hmm.
with parents. And I have different like packages available. So I will never upsell you, so to speak. If I think that you would be fine with a lower level support, I will always be honest with you because I
Mm-hmm.
have integrity, and I also I'm just super honest. If I don't think you need something, why would you spend your hard earned money on something and then maybe not feel and then feel like maybe taken advantage of. That doesn't speak to my character. And then you also aren't going to refer me. And I would say like 95% of my clients do referrals. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just always super honest with parents. It's a partnership, and you need to have that trust in one another. And if you don't have that, then you haven't found your person.
Yeah. And all that transparency, right? It goes both ways,
Yeah.
which I think is important again, that you have someone supporting you who also has those same values and beliefs too. And again, your heart is so in it, and that changes the game
Yeah.
of what you are offering to people, right? And I know even just speaking with you today, you've changed even my perspective on it.
Well,
And
all we
just
have to
like
go
give
off of
you,
is pretty much what the
yeah.
internet, and what you hear of is like, oh, you want the
Mm-hmm.
baby to cry, and you're gonna feel horrible about it, and you're gonna feel panicked the whole time. And it's like that's
Mm-hmm.
well, I mean, that might be how some people do it, but that's not how I do it.
Mm-hmm. Which I love that that's not how you do it. But again, that comes back to dating your provider and finding that person that vibes, right?
Yeah.
If people want to work with you or find you, how do they do that?
Probably just finding me on Instagram or Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Passionate About Sleep is my business name. My last name is Pashniak, so it's like Pash. So passionate as Pash as well.
Well, I love that you spelled it like that. I think it's so cute. You're passionate.
I am.
It vibes with your name, and it just, I
Goodness.
like, how did you even come up with that?
You know what is so crazy is how sometimes you just know things in life.
Mm-hmm.
So when Myra was struggling with sleep, um, sleep consultants were starting to be a thing 6 years ago, but they weren't super popular. But a guy that Logan was like besties with growing up with, he was in our wedding party. His sister is Lindsay with the Sleep Ranch. And so we reached out to her, we hired her for Myra, and then her and I just like clicked.
Mm-hmm.
And she just one day was like, Sarah, I think that you love this and you should do this. And I was just like how? Like it was like $10,000 to start my business. And it was taking a course when I had three little ones. And it was like all
Mm-hmm.
the reasons not to. But it was just like I just knew, and I just did it. And yeah, one day I was just like thinking of a business name, and it just Sarah the Sleep Whisperer was my other one, but I was just like, that sounds
Nah,
too
passionate about sleep
passionate
is
about sleep. Like I was go,
perfect.
and it just and so yeah, Lindsay and I we're almost done creating a course for a sleep consultant certification program. Because
Oh my god, that's
yeah,
amazing.
we always knew we'd work together in some capacity, and so we're almost done that. We already have our first student, and we haven't even launched, but the need is there. Like there's so
Yeah.
much need. There's so many sleep deprived parents, and just educating about infant sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, that's our next passion project.
That is incredible. Congratulations.
Thank
I
you.
did not know this. So that's so something to
It
celebrate.
is. Yeah, it's exciting.
Oh, well, you guys are going to do absolutely amazing with that.
Yeah.
If you had to go back and tell your sleep deprived self something, what would you tell her?
So many things. Like I would just be like, you are a badass bitch. Number one.
Hell yeah.
She would be like, get some help. Like,
You badass bitch, go get
badass
some help.
bitch, go get some help. But like we spent so much money on like just trivial things.
Mm-hmm.
When we found out we were having twins, we were like, oh, what should the names be? And what should we paint their rooms? And like we bought this like super expensive double stroller. And it's like we don't even have sidewalks in Lloydminster half the year because they're covered in like what was I thinking? But we
Mm-hmm.
spend time and energy and money on really the things that don't actually matter. And yet, like, I would be like, wow, I wish I would have invested time and money into learning about infant sleep
Mm-hmm.
because babies don't just sleep when they're tired. We've gone over this. So it's like, yeah, I would tell myself just go get that support. And oh, what a relief when we actually did. Like, I was like, "Man, I wish I knew then what I knew now." Like, it would have been such a different journey. So much more
Yeah.
enjoyable, so much lighter, so much oh, and every parent deserves that.
Mhm. It changes the game completely.
Right.
And I think too, like, well, just as a society, we're so into all the materialistic things and like that. And it's like, oh, I want all these cute clothes for my baby. I never freaking dress him in anything but pajamas because
I
it's too
know.
much work, because he spits up,
And
he
it's
poops
so
everywhere. I'm like, I'm not going to pull a shirt over and above your head multiple times a day. But, and again, you want the cutest stroller, you want the trending car seat, you want all of these things. And
it doesn't matter if you're not.
you can't prepare yourself for what your baby's going to be like. And so if you have those resources of like, okay, this is how I can support sleep right from the moment this babe's born, let's emphasize that.
Yeah,
That is, yeah, wow,
not even
that is.
just for the baby. Like, obviously, that's a huge chunk.
Mhm.
But is our mental health not worth that? Is our peace of
Mhm.
mind not worth that? Of course it is. But
Yep.
we're just too stubborn and I don't
Yep.
know, we're just stubborn. I would tell myself not to be so stubborn. So many things I would tell myself.
Yep. And to put yourself first, like you're allowed. How can you take care of this baby if you're not okay? And I think as soon as you get those two pink lines on your on the pregnancy stick, it's like your life is just about them now. And it's like, "Oh yeah, well I'm just going to survive. I'm going to and it's just all about the kids. It's all about the baby when in reality like you need more than that newborn needs."
Yeah, they don't really need much. They need some milk, some
No.
diaper, like, honestly, and some snuggles, but, like,
Yeah.
yeah, and it
Other than that, it's all you, girlfriend. Like
it's back to that modeling. It's like if you are
Yes.
truly putting your child first, then if you're not, you're showing them what to expect one day, and you're showing them how little
Yeah.
you think of yourself, which then they internalize of like, okay, like I guess you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They internalize
And
that
two, like
message.
they watch so much, like, you don't necessarily think about it. And just as an example, this isn't to do with sleep or anything, but it's just, like, resonated in my heart so much, and I love it. So obviously, I've been doing this podcast for, well, almost 2 months, and the other day, we got Jayla this, like, little karaoke machine thing for Christmas, and it has 2 portable microphones, and she has one of her girlfriends over, and I just hear them, like, chatting in the bedroom, so I go in, I'm like, "Oh, what are you girls doing?" "We're playing podcast."
We're playing podcast. How cute.
I was like, "Oh, whose podcast is it?"
Yeah, it's your talk.
And she would ask her a question and then put the mic in her face, and I'm like, "Oh my god." Or I was FaceTiming my girlfriend in bed the other day, and she comes and she opens the door, she goes, "Oh, are you podcasting right now?"
Yeah.
Like, "No, honey, I'm not." She's like, "Are you
Oh,
like, and it's just those little things, and every time someone comes over, she comes out, "This is my mom's podcast room."
oh my
And I'm like, "Okay, like, this project obviously resonates with my heart so incredibly much." And then, like, it obviously resonates with her little 5-year-old heart too, but
yeah,
I'm just like, yeah, don't ever forget that these kids are literally watching the breaths you take, how you breathe, and they're gonna mimic it.
yeah.
It's down to those fine things that you just do day in and day out, and this is no different.
No, I know, and but we separate that in
Mhm,
our minds.
mhm, and we need to, like,
People
normalize.
coming around to being like, "Okay."
Mhm. We have to, though. We won't survive this ride
Yeah,
if we don't,
we just showed
you know? Yes.
and it's not when sometimes there's like this misconception when you say prioritize yourself, people think like, oh, like you're more important. It's like, no, that's
No.
not it at all. It's saying because my child is so important, I'm showing
Mm.
them and I need to show up for them. And
Yeah.
uh and if I'm not, then I'm like, what good are we doing if we are putting them on a pedestal but not teaching them how to put themselves on their own pedestal? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So
And, like, the things that happen right now are going to affect them years down the road. Like, whenever they have their first memory from then on, they like, everything is going to shape them into who they're being. And, yeah, we don't get to redo it this. And so if you can listen and you can kind of grasp onto those little stories of other moms or big stories, and whether or not they resonate with you in that moment, maybe a month down the road, you're like, oh, at one time I heard them talk about this. It's like, take all of that knowledge and implement it when it feels right so that you can look back and be like, there's not necessarily anything I'd really do different. Like it went, as good as it could, or,
Yeah,
we never want to have regrets. And I think one of the biggest regrets we can have in life is not taking care of ourselves.
totally. And on that note, there's a lot of studies that, and I can't spout numbers off the top of my head, but this direct correlation between like a lack of sleep in
Mm-hmm.
infancy and toddlerhood and childhood directly connected to mental health when they're older.
I
So
could believe that.
like there's just there's yeah, there's just so much, so much. And even back to my kindergarten days, you think of a little like a little one with ADHD. There are studies that show, and again, I can't give you direct numbers off the top of my head, but like an astonishing number of children who have been diagnosed with ADHD but are actually sleep deprived because the symptoms are directly the same. So
Mm-hmm.
if you look at like toddlers and children who look like they have ADHD, you're looking at like hyperactivity, impulsivity, um, and that is exactly what being overtired looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But then it just creates that cyclone, right? So yeah, if they didn't genuinely have ADHD to start with, they probably will if that continues that way. So
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, I don't think we put enough emphasis on how important sleep is.
yeah,
So we're, like I said, we're all just grinding, we're out here doing the best we can. And sometimes, that includes no sleep or the rest or putting your phone down or
yeah,
drinking your water or,
mhm,
getting that sunlight and the natural light. And
yeah.
all of these things are so important, especially if you're another Canadian girly, then you know. If you know, you know.
If your skin's cracked and peeling, you're probably a Canadian girl.
Yeah, and you need to go to bed earlier.
Yes, and you do. Like, just if we could summarize this, it would be if you know too much about Blake Lively and Justin Baldwin, you need to go to bed early. That's
Yes,
it. You don't even
go to bed.
have to listen to the episode. That's just the criteria right there.
Yeah. If you can relate in any way, go to bed.
No, go to bed. Don't even listen to this episode. Go to bed.
This episode's too stimulating. Put on your white noise.
Yeah. Right noise. Try again.
Or your pink noise, your brown noise, whatever color
Tell
you
your
vibe
noise
with.
you want. Whatever you gotta call it.
Well, thank you for carving time out of your busy life to
Yes.
chat with me. I had so much fun. And like I said, you opened my mind up and you educated me. So I can only imagine for all the first time moms and the recurring moms who are going to listen to this, I hope that they can take all of this and just implement it. And I hope to, when they listen to it that night, they have a great night's sleep or they find you on Instagram and they get some good sleep.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm so proud of what you're doing here as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to have a conversation with anyone who has questions. Just reach out.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Please take a moment and on whatever app you're listening to us on, press that follow button to stay up to date with all future episodes. If you or someone you know are interested in being a guest on the Beyond the Birth Story podcast or a sponsor, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at Beyond the Birth Story podcast and send a message or fill out that contact form. I would love to connect with you. As always, remember to be gentle, kind, and hold space for yourself when you need it.